Okay, I'll get a report for you there. How long has she been missing?
Well, she ran away on Saturday lunchtime, but I knew where she was until she started messaging like 1 a.m. Yesterday morning.
Right.
She was reported missing. Her phone went silent. Her social media accounts stopped posting. But when detectives traced the last person who saw 17-year-old Bernadette Walker alive, they discovered something deeply troubling. The man she called Dad had turned his phone off for exactly 91 minutes on the morning she vanished, and when it reconnected, his first call lasted 9 minutes to her mother. What happened in that hour and a half would become one of the most significant cases in recent UK criminal history, because Bernadette's body has never been found. And the reason she disappeared? She had finally found the courage to speak the truth about years of inappropriate behaviour. But instead of protection, she faced disbelief. Instead of justice, she met silence. And instead of safety, she lost her life. What you're about to hear exposes the devastating cost of not believing victims and the troubling alliance between two parents who chose to protect an accused perpetrator instead of their own daughter. Stay with me. Scott Walker was 51 years old when he took Bernadette's life. To those who didn't know him well, he might have seemed unremarkable. A man who worked odd jobs as a glazier, locksmith, and handyman, though he was often unemployed. He lived in a 5-bedroom council house in Century Square, Millfield, Peterborough, with Sarah Walker and their blended family of 10 children. But beneath that ordinary exterior lay something far more concerning. Walker was not Bernadette's biological father, but he had been in her life since she was a toddler. He entered the family in the year 2006, after beginning a relationship with Sarah, who was then a pregnant single mother of 5. Over the next decade and a half, their relationship would be marked by volatility and control. By the year 2020, though Scott and Sarah were no longer in a romantic relationship, and Sarah was involved with another man, they still lived under the same roof, bound together by their children and, as it would later emerge, by shared secrets. Those who knew Walker described a man capable of presenting two very different faces to the world. According to his estranged wife Jill, to whom he was still legally married, Walker could appear polite and thoughtful to outsiders, but inside the home he was vile and nasty. Jill Walker painted a picture of a controlling, possessive man who subjected her to verbal mistreatment, coercive behavior, and made constant threats. She described living in fear of him, trapped in what she called a living nightmare. When she finally managed to escape, she tried to warn Sarah about the man she was getting involved with, asking whether he would hurt her children. Looking back, Jill would later say, "Maybe I could have saved Bernadette." Walker's history revealed a pattern of concerning behavior that extended beyond his relationships with adult partners. He had previous convictions for harassment and was subject to a non-molestation order relating to a previous partner, though police later stated these did not raise specific safeguarding concerns at the time. But his family told a different story. Bernadette's brother Anthony would later reveal that Walker had a history of aggressive behavior toward family members and that the family kept going to the police about his conduct. Bernadette Walker, known to everyone as B, was 17 years old when her life was stolen from her. She was a photography student at Peterborough College, a creative young woman with dreams and ambitions that would never be realized. Friends described her as something of a goth, someone who expressed herself through her appearance, often dyeing her hair in vibrant rainbow colors. She wore glasses and had a distinctive style that set her apart. But beneath the colorful exterior was a young woman carrying an unbearable burden of pain and fear. Bea was, in many ways, a typical teenager navigating the complexities of growing up. She was socially awkward, as many young people are, and many of her friendships existed primarily online, where she could connect with others who shared her interests. She loved photography and was pursuing her passion through her college studies. She had hopes for her future, dreams of leaving home one day and building a life free from the shadows that haunted her childhood. But Bee's life was far from typical. She had grown up in a chaotic household with 9 siblings, in a home where tension simmered beneath the surface and where the man she called Dad was not the protector a father should be. Scott Walker had been in Bea's life since she was a toddler, and over the years, according to evidence presented at trial, he had subjected her to inappropriate behaviour that she would later describe in heartbreaking detail to friends and in her private diary. One friend, Warren Naylor, testified at trial that Bernadette had confided in him that she had been subjected to inappropriate conduct by her stepfather over a 7-year period. The alleged behaviour was systematic and calculated. Walker had allegedly hidden cameras in the bathroom to observe Bee as she undressed. He had allegedly touched her inappropriately in a games room. He had allegedly violated her trust and her boundaries repeatedly, creating a situation of fear and shame that Bee lived with every single day. What makes Bee's story even more heartbreaking is that she tried to get help. She tried to do what we tell young people to do when they're experiencing harm. She told a trusted adult. On 16 July 2020, just 2 days before she disappeared, Bee gathered all her courage and told her mother, Sarah Walker, about the years of alleged inappropriate behavior she had endured at Scott Walker's hands. It must have taken every ounce of strength she had to speak those words, to finally break the silence that had protected her alleged abuser for so long. But instead of being believed, instead of being protected, Bee was called a liar. In her diary, Bea wrote words that would later deeply affect everyone who read them. Told my mum about my dad and the abuse. She called me a liar and threatened to harm me if I told the police. What kind of parent wouldn't believe their daughter? The diary entry continued, revealing the depth of Bea's despair. She said that the other kids matter more. I love feeling unwanted. I feel nothing right now because I always thought Mum would deal with it and it would all go away. But no, he's still here, telling me I made it up. Bea wrote that she planned to pretend everything was okay until she could leave home, then block her parents out of her life completely. I'd rather say I'm an orphan than say I have parents who couldn't give a care about me or what happens to me, she wrote. The entry ended with words that deeply trouble everyone who reads them. If I was brave enough, I probably would have already left, or just ended it all. After Bea disclosed the alleged abuse, the atmosphere in the house became unbearable. It was decided that Bea should spend the night of 17th of July at her paternal grandparents' house in Werrington, while things calmed down a little. She left her phone behind when she went to her grandparents' of Likes house, a detail that would later prove significant. The next morning, 18 July 2020, Scott Walker arrived to collect her. It was the last time anyone would see Bernadette Walker alive. The morning of 18th of July, the year 2020, began like any other summer Saturday in Peterborough. Bernadette had spent the night at her grandparents' house in Werrington, sent there while tensions cooled after her disclosure 2 days earlier. Between 10 and 11 o'clock that morning, Scott Walker arrived to collect her and drive her home. What happened in the next 91 minutes would become the subject of intense scrutiny, forensic analysis, and ultimately, a conviction, even though Bernadette's body has never been found. The prosecution would later tell the jury that Scott Walker harmed Bernadette to prevent her pursuing her allegations any further. The evidence that led to this conclusion was circumstantial but overwhelming, built from mobile phone data, CCTV footage, witness testimony, and the web of deception that Scott and Sarah Walker created in the weeks that followed. The timeline of that morning tells a deeply troubling story. Before Scott Walker even arrived at his parents' house to collect Bernadette, he made a detour that would prove crucial to the investigation. Instead of going straight to pick her up, Walker first visited a lock-up garage owned by his parents in Werrington. This garage would become a focal point of the investigation, visited multiple times by Walker in the days after Bernadette disappeared. After collecting Bernadette from his parents' house, Walker claimed he was driving her home when he stopped the car to talk about her allegations. He told police that Bernadette became upset, jumped out of the vehicle on Skaters Way in Peterborough, and ran off, leaving her rucksack behind. But the evidence told a very different story. Walker's mobile phone, which was usually in regular use, was switched off between 11:23 a.m. and 12:54 p.m., exactly 91 minutes. During this crucial window, the phone did not connect to any network, leaving no digital trail of Walker's movements. Prosecutor Lisa Wilding QC told the jury, "The prosecution say that in that hour and a half he killed B. But where did he take her, and what happened to her?" These questions have never been definitively answered because Walker has never revealed the truth. However, investigators were able to piece together some of his movements through cell tower data. Walker's phone activated cell sites in the Dogsthorpe and Gunthorpe areas, both in the opposite direction from where he claimed to be taking Bernadette home. These were rural areas on the outskirts of Peterborough, places where someone could act without being observed. The prosecution believed that Walker most likely ended Bernadette's life during this time period, though without a body, the exact circumstances could not be determined. What is certain is that when Walker's phone reconnected to the network at 12:54 p.m., the very first call he made was to Sarah Walker. That call lasted more than 9 minutes, long enough to explain what had happened and to begin coordinating a cover-up. Prosecutor Lisa Wilding told the court, "The only sensible conclusion that can be drawn from that telephone call is that Scott Walker told his wife that he had killed Bernadette and needed her help immediately to cover up B's disappearance and to buy them both time to work out what should happen next." What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign of deception that would last for weeks. In the 48 hours immediately after Bernadette's disappearance, both Scott and Sarah Walker made multiple trips to the lock-up garage in Werrington. They also made late-night journeys to Cowbit, a remote rural area of Lincolnshire, traveling in the dead of night when they were unlikely to be seen. Police believe these trips were made to conceal Bernadette's body and any evidence that might link Scott to her disappearance. The investigation into Bernadette's disappearance was massive and meticulous. Police conducted exhaustive searches across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, using specialist search teams, diving equipment, drones, and cadaver dogs. They scoured the countryside around Gunthorpe, Newborough, Dogsthorpe, and Cowbit. They searched the lock-up garage where Bernadette's rucksack was eventually found. They drained ponds and searched woodland, but despite all these efforts, Bernadette's body has never been recovered. Inside the rucksack found at the lock-up, police discovered Bernadette's diary. The heartbreaking entries provided crucial evidence of the alleged misconduct Bernadette had suffered and her mother's refusal to believe her. The diary became a voice for Bernadette when she could no longer speak for herself, telling the court and the world what had driven Scott Walker to act. The investigation also revealed the elaborate web of deception that Scott and Sarah Walker constructed to make it appear that Bernadette was still alive. Immediately after the 9-minute phone call between Scott and Sarah on 18th of July, Sarah began accessing Bernadette's social media accounts and email. She changed Bernadette's passwords and sent messages from her accounts to friends and family, apologizing for the allegations and claiming she had made them up. Messages were sent from Bernadette's phone, saying she had run away and needed time alone. Sarah sent texts to Bernadette's friends, claiming she was staying with friends in another area. The couple even sent messages to each other from Bernadette's phone, creating a false digital trail to support their story that she had run away. But investigators noticed inconsistencies. Friends testified that it was unusual for Bernadette not to post on social media. After 17th of July, she had been an active user, and the sudden silence was out of character. When messages did appear from her accounts after 18th of July, some friends suspected they weren't really from Bernadette. Warren Naylor, one of Bernadette's friends, received messages on 19th of July from her Instagram account saying she had lied about the allegations, but he suspected Sarah had sent them. The Walkers maintained their deception for 3 days, before finally reporting Bernadette missing to police in the early hours of 21st of July. Even then, they stuck to their story. Bernadette had run away after an argument about her allegations, and they had been trying to find her themselves before involving the police. But investigators quickly became suspicious. Why had the parents waited 3 days to report their 17-year-old daughter missing? Why were there so many inconsistencies in their accounts? And why did the mobile phone data tell such a different story from the one Scott Walker was telling? On 22nd of July, the allegations that Bernadette had made were passed to police via a social worker. The investigation took on new urgency. On 10th of September 2020, Scott Walker was arrested in connection with the allegations and for allegedly coercively controlling Sarah. The following day, the missing person investigation officially became a homicide inquiry. On 10th of September 2021, Scott Walker stood in the dock at Cambridge Crown Court to hear his fate. Judge Mrs. Justice McGowan looked directly at him as she delivered a sentence that reflected the gravity of his actions and the additional harm caused by his refusal to reveal where he had hidden Bernadette's body. Walker was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 32 years before he could be considered for parole. At 51 years old at the time of sentencing, this meant Walker would be 83 before he could even apply for release, and the court heard it was likely he would never be released at all due to serious health issues he was already experiencing. The judge's sentencing remarks were pointed. She told Walker that his refusal to reveal the location of Bernadette's body means she can't be shown the respect she deserves. She added, "Cruelest of all, it's likely to mean some members of her family and friends will go on, hoping she might be alive and might someday come back into their lives." Walker had been found guilty not only in connection with Bernadette's death, but also of 2 counts of perverting the course of justice. One for providing false information to police about Bernadette's disappearance, and another for sending messages from her phone to create the illusion she was still alive. These additional charges reflected the calculated nature of his actions and his willingness to manipulate everyone around him to avoid consequences. The sentence Walker received was influenced by Helen's Law, officially known as the Prisoner's Disclosure of Information About Victims Act, 2020. This law, passed in November 2020, was designed to ensure that those convicted of serious offenses who declined to disclose information about their victims could face longer jail sentences. The law was named after Helen McCourt, who disappeared in 1988 and whose body has never been found, despite a conviction in her case. Walker showed no emotion as he was sentenced. He remained silent as he was led from the dock to begin his life sentence. Even in that moment, he maintained his refusal to give Bernadette's family the one thing they desperately needed: the truth about where their daughter lay. Walker was initially held at HMP Full Sutton, a high-security prison in East Yorkshire that houses some of England's most serious offenders. The prison is a Category A facility, reserved for prisoners whose escape would be highly concerning to public safety. After his conviction, detectives visited Walker in prison in a final attempt to persuade him to reveal where he had hidden Bernadette's body. But Walker refused to speak with them. He maintained his silence, taking his secret with him even as his health deteriorated. On 22nd of December 2023, just over 2 years after beginning his sentence, Scott Walker passed away at HMP Full Sutton at the age of 53. He had served only 26 months of his life sentence. The cause was complications related to a serious illness that had spread throughout his body. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson confirmed his passing, stating, "Prisoner Scott Walker died on 22nd of December at HMP Full Sutton, and, as with all deaths in custody, the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman will investigate. We know this will be difficult news for the family of Bernadette Walker, and our thoughts are with them." In July 2025, the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman released findings from their investigation into Walker's passing. The report revealed that staff at HMP Full Sutton had failed in their duty to complete timely paperwork that would have allowed a review of whether Walker might receive compassionate release. However, given the nature of his actions and his refusal to cooperate with authorities, it is unlikely such a release would have been granted even if the paperwork had been completed properly. Scott Walker went to his final days having never shown remorse, never revealed the truth, and never given Bernadette's family the closure they desperately needed. His final act of control was to ensure that even after his passing, he would continue to cause pain to those he had already hurt so deeply. Sarah Walker, Bernadette's mother, faced her own reckoning in court. She had initially admitted 2 counts of perverting the course of justice, sending messages from Bernadette's phone and providing false information to police, claiming she did so without knowing Bernadette had been harmed and with the intention of covering up the allegations against Scott. However, the jury found her guilty of alternative charges that were identical, except for one crucial detail. They included the knowledge that Bernadette had been harmed. Sarah Walker was sentenced to 6 years in prison and was told she must serve at least half before being considered for parole. When the guilty verdict was read out for Scott Walker, Sarah reacted emotionally in court, crying, "No, no, she's not gone," and the hearing had to be paused briefly. It is understood that Sarah Walker was released from prison in 2023 after serving her sentence. Bernadette's family was left shattered by her loss and the betrayal by both her parents. Her brother, Anthony Walker, who was 21 at the time of the trial, spoke publicly about his stepfather, saying he didn't deserve to get out of prison. Anthony revealed that Scott Walker had a history of aggressive behaviour toward family members, and that the family had repeatedly gone to police about his conduct. He expressed hope that his sister might somehow still be found, saying he wished she would turn up out of nowhere. Bernadette's grandmother, Pat Dickinson, spoke powerfully about her grief and her need for closure. She described the year since Bernadette's disappearance as like being in a coma, saying, "We need to have closure, and Bernadette must rest in peace." She called Scott Walker horrible and said he deserves to face consequences, demanding that he reveal the location of Bernadette's body so the family could give her a decent burial. The case of Bernadette Walker exposes painful truths about how we respond or fail to respond to disclosures, particularly when those disclosures come from young people about family members. Her case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about belief, protection, and the systems that are supposed to keep children safe. The most devastating lesson from Bernadette's story is this: when a daughter finds the courage to make a disclosure, the response they receive can be the difference between life and death. Bernadette did everything we tell young people to do. She told a trusted adult. She wrote about her concerns in her diary. She confided in friends. But instead of being believed and protected, she was called a liar by the one person who should have protected her above all others, her mother. This case highlights the phenomenon of non-believing parents in cases of alleged harm, a pattern that researchers and child protection professionals have long recognized, but that remains difficult to address. Sarah Walker's refusal to believe her daughter wasn't just a failure of parental instinct. It was an active choice to prioritize her relationship with Scott Walker over her daughter's safety. That choice cost Bernadette her life. What would you have done if Bernadette had confided in you? Would you have believed her? Would you have known how to help? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. Because somewhere right now, another young person is living in fear, hoping that when they find the courage to speak, someone will listen. Thank you for staying with us through this difficult but important story. Bernadette Walker's case reminds us that behind every statistic about domestic situations and child protection, there's a real person with hopes, dreams, and the right to safety. If this case has affected you, or if you or someone you know is experiencing a difficult situation, please reach out for help. In the UK, you can contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline at 0808 20 00247. These services are free, confidential, and available 24/7. In other countries, please search for local support services in your area. What do you think could have been done differently? How can we as a society better protect young people who make disclosures? Share your thoughtful reflections in the comments. Your perspective matters, and your voice could help someone else who's struggling. If you found this video informative, please consider liking and sharing it. Raising awareness about these issues is one way we can honor Bernadette's memory and work toward preventing similar tragedies. Subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of cases that matter, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being part of a community that refuses to look away from difficult truths. Together, we can make a difference.